Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the new year. As I said, please let us know who you are and where you're joining us from in the chat box. I'm Captain Berenger, Director of Appraisal and Description at the Maryland State Archives, and also the co-chair of the COSA SERI Education and Programming Subcommittee. I want to welcome you to today's webinar, which looks at some of the changes that are coming to SERI in 2024. At the end of the presentations, I'm going to open up the floor so we can hear from all of you on your thoughts and suggestions about what you would like to see from SERI. Before we get started, I have a couple announcements. Please do stay tuned for our webinar schedule for the coming year, as we have some good stuff in store for you. This year, SERI is going to be sending out the Digital Preservation Capability Maturity Model Survey, also known as the DPCMM survey. So we're working on a webinar that'll give you some how-to information on how to fill out that survey. We're also developing a new webinar in the Chatting with SERI format to discuss the issue of transferring records from out of the cloud. In response to last year's webinar poll results, we're also working to develop webinars on digital record workflows. We also have some upcoming events. Mark your calendars now. For this summer, we have the Best Practices Exchange and the UI/UC Email Archiving Symposium in June, and the COSA SAA Joint Annual Meeting in July. And if you're...
Catherine?
Yes.
These dates are from last year.
Oh no!
So most of these things are happening, but at different times.
So do not mark your calendar now with these dates, as this would mislead you. Thank you so much, Joy. This must be a copy and paste error from our template.
I'll put the dates in the chat.
Thank you. Also, if you are planning to submit a session proposal for the NAGARA 2024 annual conference, that is due this Friday. I also want to call your attention to a few online resources. All these webinars and more are available online through COSA's YouTube page. We do have a specific playlist for the SERI videos. COSA's website also has the COSA Resource Center, a source of a lot of great material, which we're going to hear more about from our speakers today. I also want to recognize our 2024 sponsor, Preservica. And now let me introduce our speakers. Carol Cuspin is the Digital Preservation Analyst at the University of Minnesota Libraries. In this role, she works across many departments within the libraries, as well as outside the libraries, including through the statewide Minnesota Digital Library Program. She addresses current and future requirements for the long-term preservation of electronic records in the areas of archives and special collections, information and data repositories, and journal publishing. As co-chair of the library's Electronic Records Management Group, her efforts focus on developing and implementing workflows for ingesting, processing, and providing access to incoming electronic materials that are part of the archives and special collections units. After completing the initial implementation work for the Council of State Archivists Electronic Records Resource Center, she remains a member of COSA's Tools and Resources Subcommittee, continuing to assist with ongoing projects. Other current activities include teaching 2 digital archives specialist courses for the Society of American Archivists and being active on the NDSA leadership team as the chair of the Communications and Publications Working Group. Becky Jolson is a COSA staff member who has been involved in the development of the COSA Resource Center and website. With that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Carol.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am going to share some slides. Okay, look good?
Looks good.
Right. All right. Thank you, Catherine. So I am Carol Kussman, Digital Preservation Analyst at the University of Minnesota Libraries. And then prior to this position, I was the Digital Records Archivist at the Minnesota State Archives. So I do have state archives in there somewhere. It was just a while ago. But I've been directly involved with the COSA Resource Center since at least 2014 as part of the PERTS project, where the focus was on those electronic records. And PERTS stands for the Program for Electronic Records, Training, Tools, and Standards. So while the PERTS project did a lot of things, the main thing that I was involved in was creating and updates the PERTS portal for electronic records resources, which was an earlier version of the current Resource Center. So before I talk about what the Resource Center is now and plans for the future, I just wanted to take a look back at what it was and what it looked like before. So looking back a few years, this is pre-2010, an older version of the Resource Center was called the Archives Resource Center, or ARC. And this was a listing of resources just by category. The materials within this resource center were developed by and for state archives and records programs. And in 2010, this resource center was updated. I do not know what the 2010 to 2014 version looked like. I could not find a good example, but in 2014, the first version of the PERTS portal was developed and looked something like this. So the resources in the PERTS portal were categorized around the DPC-MM framework elements. COSA members have been taking this survey multiple times over the years. And because of this, we wanted to tie those framework elements directly into the SERP framework, and getting you to be able to have resources that can help you increase your level of knowledge. And so building the framework, building the PERTS portal around the framework, the SERP elements, and we also looked at what type of resource it was. Was it a policy? Was it a standard? Was it information about a tool? Were kind of the three options that we had in this first iteration. In this resource center, you were able to do a keyword search and then kind of filter on that resource type and framework element. In this iteration, resources focused on electronic records, but since 2014, the portal grew to also include other resources for COSA members that were not necessarily directly related with electronic records, and was eventually renamed the Resource Center as we had back-end web platforms changing and things like that. So we just kind of a little bit of adjustment on the back end as well. So that change in platforms allowed for the building of communities and groups with specialized interest or needs. And Becky's going to be talking about those next. But because of that, it allowed us to add these groups and different communities, but it also started to build some separation on where to find resources, which has made it somewhat more difficult or time consuming for you to be able to find the resources that you might be looking for. So we're going to kind of talk about that moving forward as well. But between each of these updates within the Resource Center, I also wanted to mention that work was done by the Tools and Best Practices Committee to review all of the resources in the Resource Center. So looking to make sure that links were still working, that things were mostly still accurate, that resources still would be helpful to the group. And that group has completed a full review of the 500 plus resources 3 times since 2014. It takes a while to go through all of those resources. So this is what the Resource Center looks like now. And so in that original version, we could sort, do keyword searching. We could sort by the resource type and the something else. But in addition to those, the SERP framework element. But in addition to keyword searching now on this new version, we have some other things that we can look for. So you can now do filtering. There's a lot more filter options on this one. So You can still filter by that resource type and the DPCMM SERP framework elements. But now there's even more options for the type of resource. So when we first started, there were only 3 different types of resources. But now there's a blog, there's education and training, forms, resource samples, policies, reports, standards, tools, web resource. There's lots of different types of resources out there. And the way that we're sharing information had changed since that early version. It wasn't just, here's my report, here's my PDF. It's now, I wrote a blog about my experiences, or I created a web page that gives a lot of information about, a wide variety of things, or even detailed information on a narrower topic. So because we found out, that it wasn't just those PDFs, there were blogs and things like that, we decided to add those different types of resource types in there, which has been helpful to categorize things. In addition to those 2, you're also able to search by topic and state as well. So things are tagged with topics, and resources are also tagged by states. So the resource could be flagged with the state name if a state created it, or if they use it. If it's something that you want to, say, yep, we use this, this is good, we support this, you can tag your state's name in there as well. So you can use this filter to find out what your peers are doing. So for example, we look in Minnesota, we look to Wisconsin to see what they're up to and kind of learn from a similar state, right? But I could also search for Minnesota and see what resources we've created or that we use. So that's how you can use that state filter. And topics were also found to be useful as more and more types of resources were added to the Resource Center, because it helps you narrow down individual topics. And so many of the resources now cover more than one topic. So it's helpful to be able to search for a particular topic. These are things that we could edit and keep adding new topics to. And this also gets back to that ARC Resource Center, that first one, which covered a variety of different topics. So we're kind of adding more information in this one spot. This is an example of a resource in the Resource Center. So after you do a search, you find the name of the resource. So on the first image here, you get just kind of general information. And then if you click into it, you get, the name of the resource, that description, a URL. On this one, it's information on who created it, the dates of creation, any related policies or guidelines that might also be in the framework, associated framework elements, and then the dates added. If you click on that URL, you're brought to that external resource, which is the third screen on the left. So this was created by the State Archives of North Carolina. So it's bringing you to the North Carolina website about file format guidelines. And this is kind of something that I think we want a little bit of feedback on. So is this type of information about a resource useful to you? So when you're thinking about what you want to search for, what information do you want? Why would you use a resource? What information do you want recorded? And if this information is not useful to you, what else would you like to see instead? So this new view method or method of viewing, to me, isn't as clean as it was in the last version, as things are now kind of added to a full library on the back end. And that means that you have to click a few more times in order to get to the information. Before, you would search for a resource, you would click it and you would open it up. So that's kind of one change, just happens with back-end changes. And because of that, because things are in kind of a wider library, we're also unable to fill in that center section as consistently as we were in the past when a template was being used to fill it out, because now it's just one big text field. So in order to enter associated SERP framework element, I need to type in associated SERP framework element : whatever those elements are, and make sure that I'm spelling everything correctly and not having typos every time I do that. So that's, kind of on the back end and filling out that information. It's more difficult. It could be still useful, but we're just kind of looking for feedback on what is useful to you? What do you want to be able to search and filter on or learn about a resource before you click on it and kind of dig deeper? But COSA has always encouraged participation. So since 2014, anybody can add a resource to the Resource Center. The goal for the Resource Center has been to be a place to find resources on a variety of topics that are going to help you with your work. So resources may be examples of what other states do, their policies around email, for example, or what tool a state uses to create checksums and how they use that tool. The goal was always to have a place that anyone could add resources. So currently there's been a Google form for being able to submit these resources, but knowing not all of you are able to use Google Forms, we need to kind of find a better way to allow for resource sharing from everybody. And then this resource sharing has not had a significant uptick in participation. So another, just question for you out there is, what reasons are people not sharing their information? I have a feeling that it's just one more thing to do. You don't have the time. I know a lot of people sometimes feel that what they're working on isn't worth sharing. It is. People like seeing what other states are doing. They like being able to have things to look at, to have whether it's just kind of a template or whether it's just information to know what their peers are doing. So just think about that. If you've got something you're working on, there's lots of different ways to share it, and COSA can kind of help with that. And so looking forward, what are those next steps? So just some other information, like the recent Backer project, which was funded by Mellon, focused on the SERP framework. So what we were using as those framework elements in the Resource Center. And the Resource Center supports the effort of the Backer project, specifically with the goal of making electronic records resources available to assist you with making your e-records accessible to your users. So one of the things that is coming out of the Backer project is the documentation of the fact that resources are not stagnant, right? COSA needs a way to be able to provide access to evolving resources and multiple types of resources. We've already added, things about blogs, but, we'll talk about this in a little bit further. It's resources are still changing. The types of information we want to share are changing. But the next thing that COSA is working on is the State and Territorial Archive Data Aggregation Planning Grant. This one was awarded through the Mellon Foundation's Public Knowledge Program. And it gives awards to organizations to have new leadership, or organizations with new leadership, to do some foundation laying for implementing their vision or a part of it, to allow them to test things out as a way to explore possible solutions for current challenges that we might have, or also prototype or pilot something on a small scale. So thinking about the Resource Center is great. It's got lots of good things in it, but maybe there's some things we want to do differently, or looking at what Becky might be talking about. So Joy can talk more at some point, and I'm sure she will, about future plans of what's coming out with this grant. But that new grant is going to hopefully allow for continued review and possible testing of a way to share information with COSA staff. Over the past year or so, there have been some discussions about what the next iteration of the Resource Center could look like. And this grant might allow us to hopefully find a good outcome and maybe do some testing with that. And one thing we've thought about is that not all resources are the same, right? So over the years, we made those few edits. We've started with those 3 different types of Resource Center. We added more over the years. But now people are looking for or wanting to share even more diverse types of resources, such as code or scripts that they're using. Have you created a quick script on how to read a nested folder structure and output a list of file names, right? Others would probably find that useful. So how can you share it? How can you share it in the Resource Center? And we'd like to find a way to be able to share those types of things. So what, we're trying to figure out is what is the best way to do this? What do you want the resource center to look and feel like? What types of resources do you want to see in the resource center? So those are all kind of things that we'll be asking in general. But just to kind of get a quick overview right now, we'd just like to do a poll. It'll either be one question or one poll with 3 questions or 3 questions, 3 different polls. And soon, so thanks, Becky. Becky put that poll up there. If you could please fill that out. And then we'll kind of share the answers. But just looking at, have you used the Resource Center? Did you find what you needed? And was it easy to use? And then in the future, COSA will be sending out kind of a more detailed survey with questions about the Resource Center, where you can provide some more detailed feedback using some of those other questions on the slides and possibly some others. So please provide your feedback on this. And then once it gets close, I have to fill it out too. And then we'll kind of look at what those results are. So Becky, whenever you think, or do I need to stop sharing?
No, I think you're okay.
Okay. All right. So these are the poll results. So 80% of people have used the Resource Center, 20 have not. 62% have sort of found what you needed. And so it would be great to know what you weren't finding, like what types of things were you looking for and what weren't you able to find, because only 24% were able to find what it was they needed. And was the Resource Center easy to use? Yes, and sort of are the highest. I'm glad no is just 9%. But trying to figure out what would make the Resource Center easier to use would be great. So being able to provide some additional feedback on what's working, what's not working, what types of things you want to see would be great. So I'm going to close that. And then the next slide is really just wrapping up. We're going to have more information about kind of what types of resources are out there for you as COSA members. But if you have any immediate questions or comments about the Resource Center, we can take them now. Otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Becky can prepare for her presentation. And thank you.
Feel free to put your questions in the chat box, or you can pipe right up with them. We will have extended time later to ask questions and also get your feedback, but this is just a mid-presentation pause in case you had any questions now.
All right. I think we can move to Becky.
All right. So kind of going along the lines of resources, another resource for everybody is one or multiple communities that we have on our website. So here's a quick list of a few that are more specific to electronic records. There are some others that we have as well. And I'm going to actually take you to the website and show you where to find them. But if you want to just kind of get a quick look here, what there is. And I did include COSA announcements, which is just general, but it's a really, really, really good one to be a part of because that's where all of our announcements come through. Let me see if I can change what I'm sharing. Okay. All right, hopefully you can see the website. Okay, I see nodding heads. So this is the website when you are not logged in. And you can find all of our communities over here on the right. And this will show you everything that is available that is set to be visible to the public to a certain degree. You can't participate unless you have an account, but you can see, like, here's the SERI community right here, tells you what kind of discussions there are in libraries and members. So you can see all of these here. State Archive staff is a good one too. And in order to join a community, you have to create an account. And I'm guessing most of you probably already have an account and are part of at least one of these communities, or you probably didn't know there was a webinar today. So if you are logged in with an account, then you can see possibly more communities that are only visible if you're logged in. And it will show you which ones you are able to join with these different join links. And I'm going to go down. This account is not a member of very many. So then you can see, if you click on it, you can see all the discussions that people are having. And this is the State Archive staff. So this is a really good one to be a part of too, where people are having conversations about lots of different things. You can share files. But this is a really great place. Any of these communities are great places to ask questions, find out what other people are doing that are maybe in a similar position as you. And we have some special interest ones like the Preservica user group. That's one that's not visible to the public at all. So if you're using Preservica, ask to join that group. But you get a lot of good information out of these groups, and we are really wanting everybody to participate. So if you want to be part of a community or part of a committee, a SERI committee, we're always looking for people to join the committees, to participate. But yeah, make use of these communities because that's where everything is happening. I think that was all I was gonna share. Go back to this. And then if you have any questions or you're struggling to, if you think you have an account and you can't log in, let me know. If you don't know how to make an account, let me know. Or any questions about any of the communities or accessing anything on the website, shoot me an email and I will help you out. Are there any questions about the communities?
Okay, so we are going to ask you all, our audience, a bunch of questions, but first, I want to throw it out in case you guys have any questions for Carol or Becky. You can type them in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand under the reaction button, I believe. Okay, in our chat group, we got a new user for the Preservica group. Hooray. Anybody out there without an account would like to sign up for a user login? They're not hard to get. Other questions? Okay, let me start asking you all some questions, and you can type your answers in the chat box, or you could just pipe up and start talking. Or if you're uncomfortable just jumping in, you can raise your hand. So going back to our resource center, Carol was showing us all those new resource types that they added to the list. Are there additional resource types that you thought would be there or that you wanted to be there that you didn't see? Carol, could you remind us what those options were? There was
Yeah, let me go back. There are blog, education and training, which would be links to, you looking for training courses or you're looking for education around a certain topic. Form and resource samples. So you're looking for a job description template, example of something like that. Policy or a guideline. So something that you've written, something that could be formally approved as a policy, could be a guideline within your organization, in comparison to a standard, which would be a published like ISO standard. A report, so a final report that you've written, a tool, and any information about a tool, and then a web resource would be like more like a web page that has a lot of different things on it. So those would be what is currently there.
So if I were looking for like a workflow, a description of how something moves through a process, which of those would you suggest I choose?
Could be a few of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways, and that's where the filtering more by the topics,
Yes.
or so like workflow could be added as a topic. Or keyword searching is what I would do.
Yeah, that keyword search really helps, because if I were looking for a workflow on how to do X, I would search for X and then see all the different ways it came up.
Right.
And while I had a workflow in mind, maybe I would see a policy that or a blog that would interest me.
Yeah, and the way that these resource types kind of came about was, being able to capture specific information. Like we want to know the date that it was the date that the resource was created, the URL for the resource. We wanted specific pieces of information. And we were not able, like those initial categories were set, but adding new categories was very difficult on the back end. And often cost money. So we were kind of stuck. So things kind of get thrown into different categories, but I would, so I don't know if that's the best way to search and filter, or if it's mostly just topics or keywords.
Oh, in the chat box, we have another customer for Preservica. That's wonderful. So you were talking about the different information you were recording about a resource and wondering if people had feedback about, if you were to pull a resource from here, what is the kind of metadata that you would want about that resource?
Yeah, what's important to you? Like, what's going to make you feel like it's a trustworthy resource, or, does it matter? You just want information.
I would think date probably would be a key one, because, a digital record resource from 2023 might be thought of as more useful than one from 2000.
Could be, but I'm also using tools that I've still used in 2014, and there has been no changes to them, and they still work well, right? So it depends. But yes, if I'm looking for a current policy, date would be very important. Yeah. Or just to get that framework idea of like, yeah, this tool was made in 2014, but still works.
Yeah, definitely for tools. If the tool hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But if you want to get an idea of what the current thinking on something is, or the latest tool. Do our listeners have any good suggestions about how we might be able to set up ways to submit resources? What you all would find easy to do, because we want to make it as easy as possible and as accessible, since not everybody has access to the same tools.
And what do people need for tools too, right? Like, do you just need information about it? Do you need to know a list? Do you need to know how to use something?
If SERI were to enter into some kind of concerted effort to go out and find a certain kind of resource to add to the resource center, if we were to make an effort to fill a certain gap, what is it you would want us to go after? Here's a suggestion, a fillable form on the COSA website to suggest new resources. We also have the comment that having background of how the tools are used would be helpful, because context is great, not just knowing a tool exists. There's somebody who would like more info regarding individual institutions' digital record processing workflows. I think that's a very popular topic based on our poll results. So that does sound like one thing we might want to solicit for submission. I know I'm always hesitant that my stuff isn't good enough for a resource center, but you know, there's somebody out there that would really love to be able to look at your stuff. I always think knowing how to use a tool is useful, as well as the operating system it's for. Oh, that's a big key. Or a call for resources for a certain topic. Maybe by topic, we should go out and solicit things. States may not realize they have a good resource to share until they see a call for resources about that topic. That's a good point. They might not realize that that's something that other people don't have. Does anyone want to share their experience of finding something on the resource center that helped them? Or going to the resource center and absolutely not finding what they wanted? We can take it. We can hear the good and the bad. Does anybody have reasons on why they haven't shared? Why they haven't shared a resource? Maybe something we haven't thought of. Is there anybody not allowed to share resources? Are they super confidential, or some kind of approval process that you couldn't get through? Any resources on BitCurator from states that use it would be very helpful. There's the call. You guys hear it. Everybody out there using BitCurator. People are desperate to know more. If we do have several BitCurator users, perhaps there's room for a community there. With communities, there are different ways a community can be set up based on what that community needs. A community is often a subset of the whole archivist group. Maybe they work in a certain field, or using certain tools, or on certain topics. An example is the Archivists Who Code was a more recent community we created. We just became aware that this is something that some archivists do, but not all archivists, so that they might be wanting to be able to communicate with each other and get support. So we reached out to that archivists that we knew that used code and asked them how we might support them. And as a result, a community was set up with regular meetings. Here we have another comment. I like the keyword search and filtering, so helpful. The thing that needs work, sometimes the links are broken because the originating website has changed location and not updated the source. Excellent feedback. We'll make note of that.
And I wonder too, if there's, thinking about moving forward, if there's a way for you all to share when something is broken, because right now it's all just a list of text that we have to look at and click on every single link. So I think might be helpful, Joy, if there was a way that people could say, hey, this is broken.
An easy way that's like right there that they can click on and point you directly to.
So the tools and best practices committee can work on trying to update those sooner rather than later, instead of it taking a year to go through the resource center.
Absolutely. Here's another comment. A reporting feature would be great. Yes, this is the kind of feedback we're looking for.
And reporting meaning what? Sorry, Josh.
I think he means those errors, like the broken links and things like that.
Yeah, great.
Although, correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah, I will say that right now, especially in light of the funding that we have from the Mellon Foundation, nothing is off the table. We've had Higher Logic for several years now. We know it's not the best solution for what we're trying to do with the resource center. So we are exploring all possible solutions and paths forward, which would include a change in platform. One of the tools that we've been investigating recently is Airtable as more of a database structure that could embed some of these like forms and reporting options either on our website, or if we were to use that as a possible replacement for the resource center. So now is the time to dream big and send all the ideas that you might have and the things, your pain points, the things you really like, whatever it is that might happen. We will have a call for some help and people who would want to be engaged with this data aggregation project in the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for that too. And I see, Catherine, we have another question from Veronica.
How formal, official do resources need to be in order to be considered reputable or worthy of sharing?
Yeah, and I just threw in there, if it's useful to you, it's probably going to be useful to someone else. I know that we have a workflow document and it's a Google Doc. It has comments in it. We are changing it constantly. In terms of, it's an active document, but we've shared it with people to be like, here's what we're doing now, and there can always be that little caveat of like, this is what we did on this date. Things may change. But
absolutely. Yeah. And, if it makes you more comfortable, you could always label something as, this was our draft. This was, this was as of this date. If you're worried to say, they'll take it and say, oh, this is officially what the Maryland State Archives is doing, when that's not the case. We could say, well, this is what Veronica thought was a good idea, and that sounds pretty good to me. All right, can you share more information about when the state and territorial data aggregation grant will be announced?
We've announced it. This was funding that COSA received from the Mellon Foundation to think about all of the data that COSA has over the decades of existence that we've been. Full way for everybody to access it and engage with all of it. I did just get a notice that my internet is unstable in case that is affecting things. What we'll be doing over the next few months is identifying a lot or all of COSA's data input points. So things like the Archives and Records Management Survey, the DPCMM survey, a lot of our historic data collection activities, and thinking about how we can set that alongside other useful data sets like the US Census. So when you're accessing something like the Resource Center in particular, you will be better able to do those comparison analyses and see yourself alongside your peers. So it's kind of a fuzzy project because the grant program is sort of a fuzzy project, and we don't really know what the outcome is going to be from it, but we threw a broad net, which will include a technology audit of all of the tools that COSA uses. We're a pretty small organization, and yet our tech stack is pretty complex. And is there a way that we can reduce that complexity so we're automating more things, and that our small staff can sort of work more efficiently to get information out quickly so that y'all have it on hand and can use it to your advantage and to your advocacy efforts. Yeah, no worries, Cassie. What may come of this, since this is a planning grant, is additional funding in the future. And it's not outside the realm of possibility. One of the things that in Backer that we've learned is a desire or a need for some sort of aggregated data point for the state and territorial archives, especially those that may not have full capacity to implement a digital archive. And so it's nothing more than the grain of an idea if COSA could be sort of a place for some sort of collaborative digital archive among the states. So we're excited to see what sort of comes out of this exploration of data within our landscape.
We also got the question of how exactly does one submit a resource to the Resource Center, which is an excellent question because it's something that not everybody knows. At the bottom of the Resource Center page is a link, and Carol also put that link in the chat box. This is what leads you to that Google form method. If that doesn't work, we still want the resource that you're trying to submit it. So please reach out to us. Carol, would they contact you directly or would they contact the general?
All. I'm happy to take emails. I think some of them have gone to the info at COSA. Kind of, yeah, if you've got something, just send it to info.cosa and we can take care of who will be working on it.
Yes, we don't want any submission barriers to keep you from sending it in. We'll work with you. info@statearchivists.org. That's a web email you can use. That's there in the chat box. So looking at the communities, Becky put up a list. Was there another community you thought you would see or you wished would be there? Maybe based around a particular topic or tool or method.
I'd also be interested to know if the group likes having these online communities or if you want to talk to each other some other way. Do you like an email listserv kind of, or would you rather us set up recurring meetings on different topics and just have those on your calendar each month or quarter?
Because different communities do it different ways. Some like a listserv. So they can just post at any time and it goes to everybody in the group. Others set up regular meetings where they can talk together. I don't know if you all have a strong preference for one or the others. Of course, the benefit of a listserv email is it you can read it at any time. Of course, the drawback might be that you won't read it at all because you have a million emails.
And the communities too can kind of act and function in all of those ways. Anytime you enter a discussion post, I guess it'll either shoot out to you directly through email in real time. You can set it up to get a daily digest or no notifications whatsoever. And then you have to actually go to the community to see what people are talking about. So it can function like a traditional listserv. And then within that too, you can also set up a weekly, monthly, however often you want to meet type of not in-person meeting, but virtual meeting too. So you can use it multiple different ways.
To again use the archivists who code as an example, since they're one of our newer communities. They were discussing in their last meeting what they like about being a community and why you might want to form your own. And one thing that they definitely did not want to do when they were forming a community is to end up being a tutor for somebody who was not using code, but wanted to. But instead, it was a community of people who were already using code so that they could reach out and communicate with people who were already doing what they were doing, and so that they could share their struggles, their discoveries. They could share what they've already done and let somebody else build off of those, solicit feedback about specific issues and concerns. And really, again, just know that you're not alone in what you're doing, and get some community support. So here's a comment about with specialized topic. I like specific meeting time to meet and talk, since it's easy to ignore notifications or not respond to a listserv topic. It's very true. Although here's a comment, we have also convened virtual conversations as topics have come up. So that's another option, as Joy was discussing. Well, I do want to say we really appreciate this feedback and suggestions, because, you know, COSA and SERI isn't doing all this stuff just for ourselves. You know, the point of what we do is to support you all. So we want to make sure that in what we're doing, it's in a way that will support you and help you. And we're always open to feedback. We can't always make every change immediately, but we do listen to feedback and try to improve things as quickly as we can. And we are coming up on the end of the hour, so let me just open it up for any final questions or comments or suggestions. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you to our speakers for this very informational presentation.
Catherine, we had one more question about the Preservica group, which
Oh,
I
we
think
did
is
have
a
a
good
question.
question.
Let's see, does the Preservica group meet regularly? I don't happen to know. Does anybody?
They're not meeting regularly right now, but over the last year or so, as the Archivists Who Code group has assembled and started meeting regularly, they recognize that they really need to reactivate the Preservica user group to shift some of the conversations that have been in that coding group, which is filled with people who don't necessarily use Preservica, and start to shift more of their conversations into Preservica specific user group. And we've had conversations now with Preservica. They're our program sponsor for the SERI program, and talk to them about how we can have maybe like intentional quarterly support from their staff if there are specific questions or pain points, development requests, other things that are coming up through conversations, and provide access to people who can make change, do those updates, whatever it is, answer your questions. So I think over the next 6 months to the year, we will see more activity in that group. And really, if there's somebody passionate about Preservica who would like to sort of start that conversation rolling, we're always interested in having actual practitioners kind of guide those conversations, and just kind of monitor and keep things rolling. That's how the Archivist at Code group has kind of been so successful, is because we have folks who are dedicated to being there once a month.
And with 2 new members, maybe that's just what we need to revitalize.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, suggestions, comments? Okay. Well, this slide lists some ways that you can stay connected and informed on what COSA is doing, including upcoming webinars. Thank you again for coming and all your feedback, and have a good rest of your day.
We're going to send a post-webinar survey too, if you would take some time to fill that out, just to give us feedback as we start this new educational year.